I'm going to read from Mark chapter 10, beginning at verse 46. Mark chapter 10, beginning at verse 46. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, that is the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard about it, it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Well, it's great to be back with you. I came here about 18 months ago. But please don't be put off with a collar, which people sometimes want on earth you are. I'm Church of England, and when I worked in the prison for 25 years in the prisons, they used to ask me and say, "Well, who are you then?" I said, "I'm a Church of England vicar." And there's some of them used to say, "Well, I'm C of E." I said, "Are you C of E or C and E?" They said, "What does that mean?" I said, "Either Church of England or Christmas and Easter. What are you?" Well, you're never sure, are you? You meet different people all the time and you don't know, and everybody puts down C of E, Church of England. But we're all a Christian family of God. That's the main thing. But some people don't know what to say to you. I mean, this morning my son and I came here a little bit early, as we always are, early for everything. And we said, my son Thomas turned around and said, "Dad," I said, "I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go to McDonald's," which is, as you know, is just up there. So we parked in McDonald's and we started walking towards the door, and a man was walking towards the door from the other way, and he took one look at me, saw the collar and did a complete U-turn. I said to my son Thomas, "Is it me? I've got a clean shirt on." And then I saw him in McDonald's and he'd come round the other way to another door. He was going to avoid the vicar, whatever happened. But the blind man in our story, Bartimaeus, was not going to avoid hearing about Jesus or speaking to Jesus. He shouted out, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "I want to see." And many people right now are overwhelmed and can't see their way forward. They're overwhelmed by information. This new age of instant news has resulted in a bombardment of sorrows and scandals, and every day a new thing to worry about. If we listen to our news screens or read our newspapers, we see new things to be concerned about. So just what is important? How can we tell? We're overwhelmed by relationships. This new age of connection has resulted in simply millions of possible social links with people and the requirements to please them all. Who are the important ones? How can we know? We're overwhelmed by choice. This has now resulted in it takes half an hour to choose a cup of coffee. If you go into a coffee shop, they say, "Do you want milk in your coffee?" "Yes, we want full fat, skimmed, semi-skimmed." "I don't know. Do you want a mug or a cup?" "Where are you sitting anyway? Do you want something to eat? Is it takeaway or are you going to stay here?" I said, I'll have a cup of tea, forget the coffee." "Do you want a mug or a pot?" "Forget it, I'll go somewhere else." And you don't know what choice. It's so many choices. I mean, have you tried to move it and go on holiday and you look at all the holiday brochures and you think, I don't know. Is there a terrorist link there? Am I going to be killed? Will my family like it? What happens if the airline goes bust? Will I get my money back? Should I pay on credit card? Should I pay cash? What money do I take? What do I do? And then somebody comes and says, have you changed your electricity? No, haven't you? Well, there's so many options, isn't there? And then you're frightened to say what your option is in case somebody says, oh no, you shouldn't have gone there. I've got it cheaper. It's so difficult, isn't it, to decide what to do. And we're just surrounded by people saying, do this, do that, do the other, follow this, follow that. In the prison, I went to a cell once, and a man said to me, I need your help, Father David. I said, what is it? He said, on the wall here, he said, and he showed me his wall on the right-hand side of his cell. He said he had a picture of 3 pictures of 3 beautiful women, all beautifully clothed, all smiling. He said, you see these women, do you think they're very beautiful? I said, they are. He said, they all want to marry me. That's what he said. They all want to marry me. He said, which one should I choose? You choose, he said. You choose. I can't make my mind up. You choose. That's when you need the wisdom of Solomon. That's when you need the wisdom of Solomon. And I said, well, which one's expecting the baby? He said, this one. I said, well, marry her then. At least the child have a father. And walked out and left him. And we're overwhelmed by the state of politics and leadership in the world. Do we have any leaders? And if so, which one should we follow? And then when we have a leader, after a while, we say, we don't like that leader. We want a new leader. We want somebody different. What do? And things just get worse and worse, and we don't know what to do. And we become unhappy. A lot of people become very unhappy in the world at the moment and in this country, and we become disappointed, frustrated. Whom shall we follow? What shall we do? How can we know? And in a very real sense, we're blinded spiritually. It's all too much. You see, the devil has put a veil over our eyes, and that we don't realize it if we're not a Christian. The devil has put a veil over our eyes. Now, you can see me and I can see you. You can see physically, but spiritually you can't if you haven't accepted Christ. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, it says, but whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. God lifts that veil if we want it. If we want God to lift that. And it was all too much for Bartimaeus. All too much for him. Here in Mark's Gospel, he sits by the roadside begging. He sat by the roadside begging, and we go down our streets many times in Bristol and Bath and other places and other cities, and we see men and women sitting by the roadside begging. And they obviously want to pick the best spot where there's most people walk past, and that's exactly what Bartimaeus did. And unable to see physically, he was apart from society. He felt rejected by society. He couldn't join in all the people wending their way down following Jesus, who was going to the Passover celebrations in Jerusalem. He couldn't join in. And like many of us today, he wasn't sure what was going on. What's going on? I can't see. But there's a noise, there's an atmosphere, there's something happening. What's going on? And so many people ask me, when they see I'm a vicar or a Christian, they ask me, say, what's going on in the world? People don't know. People are frightened by all the effects it's having on us, on our lives. We don't know one. We feel there's no one to lead us, no one to guide us, nobody to show us the way. He wasn't sure what was going on, Bartimaeus. He was confused by all the activity around him and no one to lead the way for him. And we're walking around, if we're not Christians, as blind people. We had a blind person in the prison. Many years ago, I had a blind man. At least he said he was blind. And for weeks on end, he just walked around like this all the time. And he had all the doctors and people checking him and specialists looking at him and said, I'm sure he can see, But he says he can't. And he was charged with murder. He said, how can I murder anybody? He said, I can't see. You can't prove that you can't see to somebody if they say you can't see. And he used to walk around like this all the time, like this, feeling the walls and everything else. And everybody tried to catch him out to see if he could do something and think, oh, he can see. And this went on for months and months and months. He was in the prison. And one day an officer had an idea. He put a cigarette down in the middle of the floor on the corridor. And in the prisoner, the prisoner came out this end of the corridor and he said, I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to walk down this corridor, he said. It's a straight corridor. You've done it many times, he said. And at the end there's a shower. And I want you to walk down very carefully and go and use the shower. So the prisoner said, well, I haven't had a shower for a few days. I'd like to have a shower. He said, that's fine. So the prisoner came out of his cell and he was walking down slowly. And everything was silent. There wasn't a prisoner on the wing. There was nobody on the wing except there was one officer looking from a window, from inside one of the cells. And the man came down. He was feeling his way. And he came very stopped. And then suddenly he looked down and he saw a cigarette. And he looked right and left. And he went down and picked it up and put it in his pocket and carried on walking down. He could see. I tell you, he could see. But some people, when they see me with a collar on, just several years ago actually, and again recently, I was in London and my wife was across the road and she'd been shopping in some shop I didn't particularly want to go into. So I said, well, I'll stay over this side, I said, and when you're finished, you come out and we'll go for a cup of tea. So she came out and I saw her and I was standing by the side of the road and I'd just been to a church service and I had my collar on and suddenly this lady grabbed hold of my arm and she said, it's all right, I'll take you across. I didn't want to go across. I wanted to get back to the other side. Fortunately, the road wasn't that busy. She thought I was blind. I didn't have a stick or anything. It was very nice of her. I appreciate the help, but other people have done it as well. They open doors for you. If you're a vicar, they suddenly think you might be pregnant or something. They open the door. I'll let you through, vicar. I said so before, I can clear a bar at 30 feet. It's like parting the Red Sea. You're walking in. Get out of the way, the vicar's here. And Jesus was walking towards Jerusalem for the final time. He was on his way to be crucified. His followers were walking with him, listening to his teaching, because that's what they used to do in those days. That's how they used to teach. They didn't have Bible schools, as we were talking about earlier on. Used to walk and talk at the same time. So Jesus was walking along and he had people following him and they wanted to listen to what Jesus was saying, so they kept as close as they could to him to hear his voice and say what he was. And Bartimaeus was sitting on the roadside, but he heard the commotion, something going on, and something stirred about him in his spirit, and he thought, I better shout out in fact, what's going on here? And somebody turned around and said, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. He must have heard of Jesus. He must have heard of Jesus before. Thank goodness he did. And so what he did was he shouted out. He said, Jesus, have mercy on me. And people wanted to hear what Jesus was saying. They said, be quiet. And told him to keep quiet. They wanted to listen to what Jesus... They won't listen to a man shouting out Jesus. But he was persistent. You see, he had one opportunity. One split-second opportunity to turn to Christ. One opportunity. Jesus would not walk past that way again. And this was the turning point for blind Bartimaeus. On this one opportunity. And this morning, you have one opportunity to turn to Christ. You might only have one opportunity. Perhaps that represents you, your one opportunity. Perhaps you feel a bit confused, bewildered, not sure of the way ahead. Not sure if you died tomorrow you'd go to heaven. If you're not sure, make sure this morning, come forward and give your life to Christ. If you feel about like him, a bit like your heart is broken, but it's stirred up inside. You feel some stirring inside. You think there's something about this message. There's something about God is calling me this morning. Then the good news is the miracle that Jesus did with Bartimaeus is available for you this morning. How can that be? Well, let's learn from Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus was persistent. That's one thing about that man. He was persistent. He shouted out, and when they told him to shut up, he thought, no, I'm not going to take any notice. I'm shouting out here loud, and I'm going to carry on shouting, because as you go out of earshot, if you don't shout loud enough, the person is gone. So he only had a split second to decide to keep at it. And working in the prison, let me tell you, prisoners are persistent. They can be very persistent. If you walk down the wing of a prison and you've got cells either side of the wall, either side, and you're walking up or down or wherever you're going, you're walking down, and they have a flap in the cell of the door, and their hands go out and wave up and down, and they can see you, and maybe you can just about see them, but only just by the, if you look through the flaps and so forth, and they bang on the doors, they say, Father, over here, Vicar, over here, please help me, cell number 7, I need you, and all the hands are out and so forth. And if you don't take any notice, they'll grab hold of you and pull you towards them. If you can get past, they can grab hold by the hand and say, well, I need you. I need prayer. I need help. Please, will you help me? And that's what it was like. And Bartimaeus was persistent. He was not going to be stopped meeting Jesus. He wanted to change. He decided, I needed to change my life. And you've got to want to change. You can't do it yourself. You can try, but you can't do it yourself. He was determined to find an answer. He thought, this is the answer. This is the man I've been waiting for to see. See spiritually. He doesn't see Jesus as a nice idea. He saw him as a real thing, the truth. When Jesus was when he'd been arrested and he was being tried on trial, he turned around and Pilate said, what is truth? What is truth? He asked Jesus. And Jesus had earlier said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus said, I came into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. And secondly, Bartimaeus was prepared for action. Many people hear the call of Jesus. Over your life, many times you might have heard it. And they like the idea, but they take no action. I'll respond to Jesus when I've done this or when I've finished that. When I nearly finished my life, I had a lady once who said to me, I'll come to Christ, she said, as I'm dying. As I'm dying. I said, how do you know when you're going to die? Do you know I was no good at maths at school, but I know that 1 out of 1 die, that's it. That's the only fraction I learned. 1 out of 1 die. And they don't realize the chance can sometimes only comes once. They may never hear that call again. Billy Graham tells a story about when he was preaching in a big city in America, in a church. And he saw a man after the service who was trembling under the power of the Holy Spirit. And he went up to him and he said, will you give your life to Christ now? And the man said, no. He said, it's Monday today. He said, but I promise you, he said, Dr. Graham, I'll come on Friday and I'll give my life to God then. And Billy Graham said, are you sure you'll live that long? He said, I'll take my chance. Friday morning, that man was killed by a bullet from a policeman's gun. It was a stray bullet, ricocheted off and hit him in the neck. He died not knowing Christ. In the prison, we had a very, very popular prisoner. Some prisoners were more popular than others. He was just a well-known face. He'd been a drug addict since the age of about 8 or 9, and he was tried every type of drug and every type of drink, every type of thing. He tried everything he could to find satisfaction for his soul over the years. And at the age of 27, he was put in the prison again. And he came to me and he said, David, he said, I'm in absolute distraught mess. I'm in a total mess. My life's a mess. He said, my family have rejected me. He said, I've stolen from my mother and father. He says, I've done things I shouldn't have done. He said, I've used every vein up in my body on drugs and things like that. He said, I need God's help. Can God help me? I said, God can. And with that, he gave his life. He says, I'm sorry, God. I led him in a simple prayer. I'm sorry, God. He says, I'm sorry, God. I said, you really mean that, don't you, Jake? He said, I do. I said, I want you to ask for Jesus to come and take over your life. He said, Jesus, take over my life. I'm so sick of this drug habit, this drink, everything else. My whole life's a mess. I then laid hands on him, and he was filled with the Holy Spirit of God. And he looked up at me and said, what am I on? Because he'd had all these highs, which are only for a very short time. He didn't realize the Holy Spirit gives you a perpetual high in your spirit, in your heart, in your soul. And then for a whole month, he was clean off drugs. He was completely clean. God did a fantastic work with that man. And he went around the prison and he was telling everybody about Jesus. For a whole month, he told prisoners, and many people came to Christ because of his telling them about what it was like and what he feels like now and so forth. And then the day before he was let out, he was having a prayer time with his cellmate who he'd brought to Christ, and they were praying together. And the next morning he was let out at 9:30, and the following day he was dead. And the prisoners who heard about it, and they came back and they told me about it, they'd heard from outside people that he died because he was so well known in the community. They said, he's died. Can we have a memorial service for him? I said, we can. And in the chapel, it was absolutely full that day, and we had a memorial service especially for Jake. And during that time, I told the prisoners the story of what Jake did and how he gave up his drug habit and drink habit and everything else, and he gave his life to Christ. And we had so many people coming forward said, I want the same. He died, but he saved others. But he didn't die as much as Jesus died. Jesus died on the cross to save all of us. That's why he stood on the cross. That's why he was on the cross. People say, how much does Jesus love me? He loves me this much. His arms outstretched on the cross. He wants to save you and me. He wants you to give your life to him. That's why he came. That's why God sent Jesus, to bring us back to God. That's what he did. That's why he died on the cross for us. Christ died to save sinners like me and you, so that we might have everlasting life. You'll still have your problems in there. Whenever you accept Christ, you've still got your troubles. We're talking earlier on, the ladies earlier on was talking about depression and other things. You'll still have those things. You still have those things to battle with. It doesn't all just suddenly disappear. It's tough being a Christian. Take up your cross daily, we're told. It's a daily battle with temptation. But you won't be able to fight that temptation without Christ. Amen. And Christ has been tempted in the same way as we have. You say, well, has he been tempted with sex? Yes, he has. Has he been tempted with this? Yes, he has. Was he tempted to steal? Yes, he would have been. He says, I've been tempted every way that you have. And therefore, I understand about the temptations. And that's why I'm able to help you deal with the temptations. But unless you've given your life to Christ, you won't be able to deal with those temptations. You'll still be tempted when you become a Christian, but you'll have God inside you. That's the main thing. You've got God inside you. Amen. He says in Hebrews 2, verse 18, because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help us with those who are being tempted. That's what he promises. And the trouble is, every time we do something wrong, we heard earlier on about cords, and somebody was speaking about cords of things wrapped around you, and that's what the cords of death entangle you. That's what happens to people. Whenever we do something wrong, we get another rope round us. We get another rope, and it ties us like that. And many people think, oh, well, you see, the thing is that God doesn't notice everything I do. You know, they used to say that in the prison. They used to say to me, I used to burgle this place, and said, David, he said, but there was no CCTV cameras. I said, God sees everything. He doesn't need CCTV. It says in Proverbs that man's ways are in full view of the Lord. He examined all his paths. The cords of his sin hold his heart, hold him fast like that. Do you know the pop group Queen sang that great song, I Want to Break Free? Yeah. But only Jesus can make you go free. We're talking about freedom earlier on. If you want to break free, you have to be freedom. Jesus is the only one who can make you break free. You say, well, I'm so trapped on the relationship. I'm so trapped with the problems I've got. I'm so tempted with pornography. I'm so tempted with drink. I'm so tempted with drugs. I've got all these problems in my world. You don't understand the problems I have. I don't understand the problems you have. But God understands them. He made you. And He wants to save you. That's what He wants. Bartimaeus was not going to miss out. He was not going to miss out. He took action, responded to Jesus. Will you respond this morning? Will you come forward at the end of this service and give your lives to Christ? Maybe you've given your life to Christ and you just need to recommit your life. Maybe you've got other problems you want to talk about and you want to pray about, and you want somebody to come forward who's independent, who will just come forward at the end of this service. I'll invite you to. And Bartimaeus knew what he wanted. Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for clothes. He wanted to see. And coming to Jesus with a lack of self-knowledge or willingness to see your problems is always a bit vague. He asked for his sight and he got it. He knew he was desperate and he didn't mind other people knowing. It's an individual decision. And we cannot come to Jesus unless we're open and truthful and we say we actually want God to help us. You see, God is not interested in what we look like. He's not worried about a perfected or airbrushed selfie. He's not worried about that. He don't worry about what you look like. He doesn't care. He made you. To you, you look beautiful. That's wonderful. That's all that's needed. You look in the mirror and say, my goodness, I look good looking. That's fine. You want to kid yourself with that? That's great. God doesn't care. He just wants your soul. And Bartimaeus got things wrong. He got things wrong. He was no theologian. He called Jesus the Son of David, but Jesus was so much more than that. But it doesn't matter. In the prison, somebody called me once, walking along the corridor once, said, excuse me, your worship. He'd obviously been to court, hadn't he? Somewhere along the line, I looked round, I couldn't see anybody else, so I said, it must be me. Is that, you want me? Yeah, you, your worship. I want you over here. It didn't matter. The main thing that matters was that he came with faith. With faith. Not an intellectual understanding, not with money, not with any good works, but by faith. We may not understand all about God and Christianity and the Bible and everything else, and it's great to go on a Bible course and things like that. That's great. I think that's fantastic what you're doing in this church. But you need to give your life to Christ by faith. It's by faith that you take the little children across the road and you hold on a little child and they're 2 or 3 years old. They don't know the road. They don't know whether it's busy or not or whether it's safe to cross or not. They trust you. They put their hands in your hand and you just take them across. They say, no, wait. It's not clear yet. They don't know. They didn't even look. They just trust you and you just take them across. And that's what it's like coming to Christ. You have to put your hand in the hand of Christ. Say, actually, Lord, I don't understand everything that's going on here. Don't ask me about suffering and pain and all the other things. I don't know. All I know is I've got an opportunity and I want to follow you. Please, will you take my hand? And God will. Bartimaeus' response to Jesus was deep and personal. He came to help Jesus in faith because he knew he was the only one, the only way forward. You see, you can't get to God through any other way. You have to go through the narrow way of the cross. And people think, oh no, that's too simple for me. It's too simple. It's got to be more complicated than that. Let me tell you, it's not complicated. Put your trust in God and ask for his forgiveness. And Bartimaeus realized something had happened. And he grateful. He did not just go on his way and thought, thank you very much, I'll go back to my begging. He knew he had to change. He threw off his coat, we're told, and he came running to Jesus. In his blind way, he came running to Jesus. And Jesus asked him specifically, what do you want? And when he could see, when Jesus created a fantastic miracle and realized he could see, he followed Jesus. He carried on. It wasn't just a one-off event. He carried on and wanted to follow him. He gave them his loyalty. You see, if you want to become a Christian and change your life, you need to do as Bartimaeus did. You have to acknowledge your need. You have to say, actually, I've made a mess of my life. And so many people are so proud that they think they can carry on and don't need Christ. Do you know, we had a man in the prison who only had half a face. He was in a car and he was a drug dealer, and somebody shot him from the side window and shot half his face, and his face was all crushed into one. He lost his right eye and half his face, and all his face was just smashed in. And he came into the prison. And I had to see as a vicar, I had to see every new prisoner who came in. I went to see him in the hospital wing. And I remember going to see him, and I said, what happened to you? He said, a man shot me in the face, he said. I've only got half a face now, he said. He could just about speak. I said, God has obviously protected you. He said, somebody was looking after me, he said. I said, that somebody was God. I said, do you want to give your life to Christ now to say thank you? He said, no. I'll take my chances with the Almighty. You see, it's your decision. God doesn't force anybody to accept him. It's your decision. He decided no. You should decide yes. You acknowledge your need. Receive Jesus' help. Say, God, I'm sorry for everything I've done wrong. I need your help. I need your forgiveness. Please forgive me. God said, even though your sins be like scarlet, they should be as white as snow. I can do something that God can't do. I can remember the bad things I've done. God says, I'll remember your sin no more. He says, I'll wipe it clean. The sheet is clean. Whatever you've done, it doesn't matter, from the biggest murder to the smallest lie. I remember standing up in the prison and saying, we've all done something wrong. I said, we've all told a lie. And a man stood up and said, I've never told a lie in my life. I said, you've just done your first one. Welcome to the human race. Give your loyalty to Jesus in gratitude then when you've given your life to Christ. Yes, Lord, I want to follow you. Are you ready to do that this morning? Are you ready to come forward this morning? You know, Jesus did everything in public. He did that in public. He healed Bartimaeus in public. He did it in front of other people. Bartimaeus did it in front of other people who knew he was a beggar. They were watching him for days on end afterwards, watching him thinking, I wonder if he's going to go back to begging again, pretending he's a blind man. But we have no record of that. What do you want me to do for you? I want to see. His miracle is for you and for me this morning. So choose this day to see clearly. You see, the thing is that Jesus is passing by today. The Holy Spirit is passing by over this room today and saying, I want you to come forward to give your lives to Christ. I want you to come back. God's calling you to come back to him. And the thing is, you won't come unless the Father draws them. So we need to pray this morning that God draws you to him. John's Gospel said they won't come unless the Father draws them. Maybe Jesus is drawing you this morning.